Jonathan, thank you for being with us. I want to ask you, it's been a journey for you, and now here you're going to screen your film, and it's like your soul is going to be on the screen. And at times it's kind of heart-wrenching. You see you sitting in the storage room. What was your feeling the first moment you opened that storage door?
I was overcome with emotion, really. This was a place reserved for those things my father felt were the most important to him. I wasn't driven by the Johnny Cash story. I was driven by a need to find out if there was anything about me in my father's favorite things. And the answer was no, but ultimately, as the movie unfolds, we see that I really was preoccupying his mind through all of these audio diaries and telephone calls with Cash that I found.
Because it seems to be the age-old epic story of the son looking to the father and trying to find out what he really thought. And, at this point, after all that, can you sum it up in a sentence or two? What you feel your father thought and maybe never told you?
Yeah, I think we're dealing with a situation very common, especially with our generation, with parents who are two-dimensional authoritarian figures who never share any feelings, hugs, expressions of love. And then I find these very personal audio diaries taped from the time I was born until the time he died, in which I discovered, shockingly, that my father led a very rich emotional life and that he lamented the fact that he wasn't a good father. And so that allowed me to forgive him and ultimately reconcile with him.
Through your years that you were growing, did you ever really think of Johnny Cash as the one who took your father away? Or was Johnny just like a side note and really it was all about the family?
Johnny was no side note. He was the third part of this triangle. I was 9 months old on my first Johnny Cash tour. And when I was very young, I suppose it's true that I did resent Cash for taking Dad away, just as we would any employer where we have a parent dedicated to work more than family. But as I grew older, I fell in love with Johnny Cash, and he was magnetic, as everyone knows, but he was particularly good with my brother and myself and loved to spoil us, and I have many fond memories growing up with Cash.
You had said something in the movie towards the end when you were talking about your brother, that he got it right, that he's the most loving father. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, I suppose, and it sounds kind of corny, but the movie, in a sense, is really a cautionary tale. It's about breaking the cycle of dysfunction in one's family. And my brother became the father to his daughter that he always wanted for himself. So he broke that cycle, and I guess the message I want people to take away from this film is if they have an issue with one or the other parent, they better resolve it now, because they're not going to find a storage locker full of audio like I did.
Is that the big thing that you want people to take away from at the end of the movie? Talk to them now if you can.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a family memoir wrapped around the Johnny Cash story, and I think I'm very gratified by the fact that audiences worldwide, we've been to 15 countries with this film. At the Q&As, 85% of the questions are not about Johnny, but about family dysfunction, mutual swapping of stories about the experience of suicide, dysfunction among parents and sons and daughters. So the fact is, so many people can relate to it. It has broad appeal, and that's very gratifying.
Just one last question, Jonathan, if you want to answer. If your father was here with us right now, what would you want him to know about you, the grown man looking back at those years and telling him something now? What would you say to him?
Well, I would hope he'd see my movie, which speaks for itself, but I think he'd be tickled pink by it. I think that, there's no question that he was a larger-than-life figure who enjoyed the money and status of being Johnny Cash's manager at a time when, in 1969, Cash was outselling the Beatles. He was the #1 selling recording artist in the world. So I guess what I'd like to tell him is that I love him, I forgive him, and I only wish that he was able to tell me these things to my face when he was alive.
Jonathan, fantastic movie. Thank you for sharing, and I think you're absolutely right. Everyone's going to find something for themselves regarding a father figure. Thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you very much.